It's Thursday, July 23rd, and welcome back to the summer series where I preview all the NFL divisions and hopefully provide some meaningful touch points that we have from the end of last season all the way through now. There's a lot of touch points, and my job isn't to necessarily make you say do this or do that, but point to a process that hopefully enlightens you and makes you a better handicapper as you prepare for the 2026 season. Before I start, I do want to thank those who have reached out to me. I know I have a small audience. That's fine. I'd love to grow it, but that's fine. But a lot of you have reached out, say you appreciate the kind of information that I'm providing on PowerPoint and so on. And I just want you to know that that makes me feel good and makes me want to keep doing this. So thank you for reaching out. It's really all about the process I'm trying to provide and trying to do it in a way that maybe others don't. Look at different data points. Maybe it appeals to you, maybe not. You decide, but hopefully you get something out of these different 30-minute conversations. With that said, here we go. We're going to talk right away about, yes, that famous division, the NFC South, where 8 and 9 can win you a divisional title. We start alphabetically with Atlanta, perennial underachievers, considering they probably have had some of the most talent of the division, and they've had good offensive line talent. They've had some wide receivers. They're finally using their tight ends, but they've underachieved. We had about a 5 to 8 year period where Atlanta was dead last in sacks per season. Last year, they made it a point, beyond making it a point, to go ahead and change the narrative. And it was an incredible change, 57 defensive sacks, more than double their averages over the past 5 to 8 years. So what an incredible change. Unfortunately, it still didn't get them to a divisional title, but they were able to improve their defensive pass percentage because the defensive backs had less time that they had to cover other people. And they had, despite quarterback play, a +8 interception differential. So these are all good things that happened. They kept their defensive coordinator. Remember, they fired their head coach. He was on my bottom 3 coaches list for the NFL. They fired their head coach. They've upgraded now with the new head coach and with offensive coordinator Rees. I've talked about that in podcast 3-4 months ago. And I'm very happy that they kept their defensive coordinator because of the changes that you see up above with the stat sheet. So needle pointing up so far. Let's continue. Free agency, they were down one wide receiver. Michael Penix is left-handed. Tua is left-handed. One of them is going to win the job. Regardless of who wins the job, the other one better be ready because Tua has been concussion prone. And we know that Penix, he's had numerous injuries in college and even in the NFL. I suspect we'll probably see both quarterbacks at some time during 2026. Now, it's our jobs to determine whether one is better than another. Right now, I think Tua would be about a point, maybe even a 1.5 better than Penix, in my opinion. Let's see how it plays out in preseason. I may change that. You may disagree with that. Right now, I have Tua a little bit better than Penix. As I do with every team, I look at their schedule. The schedule analysis is not just about strength of schedule, but it's also about some of the tidbits that are going in. You know, if Atlanta has a favorable schedule but has bad weather games, they balance each other out. In this case, neither. I'm not putting anything that they have a favorable or an unfavorable schedule, but they do avoid bad weather, which is good news, being a dome team. Their bye is way late. I'm not crazy about that for a new coach. I'd rather have the bye earlier so that they can make some adjustments. I think fatigue is likely. I can't go into the nuances here. I wrote a schedule analysis report that details it team by team. But Atlanta will have fatigue before their bye. It's play against time when you get to those 2 or 3 games before the bye. Word to the wise. As usual, Not a deep draft. We know they traded their first round pick to the Rams last year in order to get a sacker. Of course, the particular pass rusher that they got almost got suspended this past year, may still, as far as I know. I don't know about civil cases pending, so don't quote me on that. But he wasn't the prime reason why their sack totals went up. But unfortunately for them, it was a very small draft. Zachariah Branch is a very sure-handed receiver, very capable receiver. But at Georgia, I highlight him because his yards per reception, minimal, under 10 yards per reception. So I don't think it's a tremendous asset that they got him here. Maybe it's an asset for special team play. I think he could add to that unit. The Terrell brothers are now the cornerbacks. The worry I have with Terrell is time speed. Cornerbacks, in the past, I made the mistake of overrating cornerbacks who were slow but were efficient in college. No question Terrell has the brotherly genes in order to be effective in the NFL, but his time speed was not fast. If for some reason he was injured, was under the weather, and his time speed improves, great. But overall, I'm not crazy about inserting a cornerback with his level of speed. Overall, this was my 30th rated draft. Unfortunately for Atlanta, they tend to be in that ballpark year after year, so that doesn't make them any better. The good news is, even though you see only 6 picks, they actually didn't trade back in the draft, didn't trade up in the draft. They didn't sacrifice picks. Crazy, because they always sacrifice picks. Unanswered questions. Maybe we could say this about every team in this division, but there's been no week-to-week consistency with Atlanta. They win, they lose, they win, they lose, they win, they lose as a favorite. I need to see more consistency. So the coaching change is good. Let's see if we can get that. Can they regroup and at the end of the season be relevant? Let's see if they can make divisional games 15-17 matter. Yes, they closed with 3 straight divisional games, which means all things considered in this division, they may control their own destiny. Their goal is to make the playoffs. My goal is to play for the NFC West title in games 16-17. Winner in kind of divisional games like we saw last year with the round robin with 3 teams being eligible at the end. Make these games meaningful. Their win total opened 6.5, but was up to 7.5. Still slanted to the under, but a little bit of action on Atlanta with the opener of 6.5. My power rating is below par. You're going to see a lot of below par power ratings in this division. 23.5. That's a little more than 2 points, below the league average. Good thing they play 6 games against their divisional rivals, but overall, I would call them a below average team. There is upside because of their elevated staff. There's downside because injuries happen, and this draft class is just another in a series of draft classes that tends not to be one that adds depth and adds roster emergency in case of injury. So that's the downside. I think the return game could be elevated with Branch, which is a good thing. I care about special teams. I don't like the schedule flow. I don't like the late bye. That means for me, I think Atlanta will be more in chase mode. If you want to back them, you might get a better number later in the year. If you want to fade them, you may want to do it before we get to the fatigue part of their schedule. That's my 2 cents on Atlanta. Here's the team, Carolina, that won the division backing in. I heard on the radio yesterday how they won the title by playing effectively in December and January. That was not the case. I believe they lost 3 of their last 4 games. What they did do is play big against certain teams, including the Rams, and including the Rams in postseason, gave them all they can handle. But again, no consistency. No changes with the coaching staff. I would call the staff overall middle of the pack. Good pass rusher in Phillips added to the roster. He played in the AFC East for most of his career, and I think he's young enough and fresh enough that he adds value. 30 defensive sacks, could go up because of his presence. There's O-line depth, which is actually, as I speak today, incredibly important. Both offensive tackles are now down and may miss the start of the year. One may miss the entire year. We just learned today of a serious injury to one of their offensive tackles. So we're going to be dealing with uncertainty and youth in the starting offensive line. It's a good thing I said they had offensive depth because they're going to need it. They're weaker at linebacker. Their uncommon foes are a bit tough, but that's what you get with a first place schedule. The good news, fewest miles traveled in the NFL. More good news, if they can serve at home. Carolina has been average at home, but if they could serve at home, 4 of the last 5 games are at home. So it's a balancing schedule. The uncommon opponents may be a little tougher than the rest of their divisional rivals, but they're at home for the last 5 weeks. I should double bold Freeling as offensive tackle. You see that I've highlighted him, and I've highlighted the center, who's a try-hard center from Kansas State, who will make the roster, especially now. And it may be hard to keep him out of the starting lineup down the road. Maybe not this year, but maybe even in 2027. I think Carolina did the best work with their offensive line, and now Freeling may start. This was a really hard draft for me to evaluate. By personnel standards, this was Carolina's best rating draft in quite some time. By focus, this was one of their worst drafts. If I lined up what Carolina's needs are, the positions they took do not match their needs. If I lined up the positional value that they got, was Freeling a first rounder? Yes. Was Hunter a second rounder? Yes. Was Brazil a third rounder? Yes. Was Lee a fourth rounder? Maybe even a third rounder. Was a Kansas State center a fifth rounder? No, he was a third rounder, late third rounder in my estimation. Penn State's safety was properly drafted. The linebacker was properly drafted. They made no reaches in this draft. They didn't fill needs according to my estimations. So this may be a draft that, other than offensive line, you're going to say in 3 or 4 years, wow, we look back at the 2026 draft. These guys are starters. But for 2026, I think the focus was off. Unanswered question. What is Bryce Young's floor? Well, we know what his floor is. I saw games. What were there? 2 games where he threw for under 100 yards, and then 3 or 4 games when he was incredible, 300, 325, 340 yards. But we need his floor to rise. We need the bad games to not be 75 passing yards. I think Bryce Young is a very smart and cerebral quarterback, but he doesn't have the skill set of a top 15 quarterback, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think, but for me, the question came up a couple of days ago. Would you pay him $40 million? Would you extend him this year? Because it could get pricey next year if he delivers in 2026. Personally, I'd wait, because if there's a low ceiling for Bryce Young, I'd rather swing and try to get another quarterback. But again, let's see. This is a pivotal year for him. Is there enough talent on defense to make consistent stops? I'm skeptical. I think it's an okay defense. It's not a perfect defense. It works in the NFC South, where they're going to be competitive and vie for the title. But I don't think it's a true playoff-worthy power rating over average defensive unit, but we'll see. Their goal is to be, hey, this wasn't a fluke. We're going to repeat as the South champs. My goal is just, I don't know if they can repeat with the uncommon opponents that they have, but maybe control their own destiny, put it in their hands again, like last year, and deliver this year would be a good thing for them. Finally, just like Atlanta, maybe the odds makers said, hey, they play each other 6 times. We'll bump up Carolina's win total. It's juiced up to 6.5 minus 160 now. I haven't checked in a couple of weeks, but this is where we are. Doesn't move that much this time of year. Some 7.5s again. My power rating is possibly a bit low. At least that's when I wrote this. Now I'm going to stick with this because of the offensive tackle problems that they've had over the last couple of days. So this is a low power rating. This is tied for the lowest in the NFC South, and they just won the NFC South. So my feeling is this isn't a great team, and 7.5, I may look at that and say, wait a second, I don't think they can reach that. Even though I think they had a good draft in terms of talent, there's still some holes on the roster. 8 and 9, metrically, if you look at their skill set, if you look at Pathag, if you look at a couple of their other areas, that 8 and 9 transferred to 7 and 10 or 6.5. So they weren't even as good, in my opinion, based on stats I've used for decades. They weren't as good as that 8 and 9 record, meaning they have to be better just to get back to 8 and 9. And that's why you see the win total at 6.5 and 7.5. This is really up to Bryce Young. It's as simple as that. It's really up to Bryce Young. I'm going to say Carolina will sink or swim depending on how Bryce Young does. I'm leaning bearish on them more than anything. I don't know if I have any questions. Let me double check here. Okay, let me go ahead. Take a break now. Handicap to Cap. Thank you for listening and watching. You think Tua is better than Penix? By far. I agree with you. I think he's better than Penix by far. That's a wait and see. Penix on his good day. Penix is kind of like Bryce Young to me. I've seen stats where he threads the needle. He's very streaky. And I've seen stats where, he's not an NFL quarterback. So that's what you have to deal with there. Stefanski raved about his quick release. Yeah. He was taught that by McDaniel at Miami. He has one of the quickest releases in the NFL, and that's good, especially good. So this is a really good point because, again, Carolina's offensive line has been compromised by injury, and we haven't even started the season yet. So a quick release is definitely going to be essential in terms of that. They lost Nick Scroton, carted off the field earlier today. Breaking news. Thank you. This isn't good. Carolina hasn't even started the season, and we're already 0 for 3 in terms of, Carolina has some work to do. So thank you so much for the comments. I'll check again after I get through the next two teams. Always appreciate it. I'm glad when people chime in, and thanks for the breaking news. The Saints were interesting because they were at one point 2-10 last year. So I was already ready to cash my under 6.5 win ticket that I meticulously had to deal with management at a downtown casino that I won't name right now, where even to make a bet over $100, I had to have some sort of management approval from off-site. But New Orleans still had that 6.5 ticket available, or at least this casino had it, and that's the number I wanted. They went from 2-10 to 6-10, and were just 2.5-point underdogs in the last week of the season. Hats off to Kellen Moore, who I think has a tremendous future as a head coach. And the other thing I think about him is that he was dealt, pretty mundane roster, shall we say, and it's still a rebuilding experience. But he got these guys to try hard. We never heard New Orleans letting down as compared to the Jets or other teams, infighting or anything like that. We heard nothing but positives out of the Saints all year long. And Las Vegas Chris and I commented on that often in our weekly seasonal podcast. There are problems, though. Tyler Shuck, I was not high on him coming out of college. He is, in my opinion, in his first 8 or 9 games, has exceeded my expectations. So hats off to him if that continues. I'm happy to be wrong if he's the answer. He did a really nice job in games 9 through 17, but he was sacked 27 times in the last 7 games. So he may still be developing his pocket presence. I know it's not a world-beating offensive line, but still, we're going to have to double check. I would recommend charting how much he gets sacked in September, let's say this year, to see if that's an issue that needs addressing. No changes. Again, I said the staff had them playing hard. In free agency, we saw certain segments of the team improve. Now, they just re-signed Alvin Kamara, the running back. To me, that's a neutral or a net loss because I think Kamara, especially on yards per carry running the ball, has lost a step. I would rather see replacements for Kamara, to be honest. I wouldn't have minded if he wasn't on the roster. Maybe you guys feel differently, but I'm not a big fan of him. So I'm glad for the upgrade there. I'm glad for the update at tight end and an offensive guard. These are offensive positions. The defense, I thought it would slide a little more last year without Dennis Allen in the building, but they held their own last year considering that their offense was in transition. The defense was down just a little bit. Okay, so this by far is the second easiest schedule in the NFL. I haven't gotten to the team, or let's see, I did get to the team with the easiest schedule already. This is the second easiest. Detroit's is the easiest. The difference between the second easiest and the third easiest team is massive. So the Saints will have no schedule, difficulties, no excuses. Yes, there's a 4 road game stretch, 4 road games in 5 weeks that they have to navigate. Everything else isn't bad. I'm highlighting 3 players here. Jordan Tyson, he was a little polarizing because he's had a lot of hamstring issues. Can he stay on the field? If both Tyson and Olave are healthy, this is automatically a really good 1-2 punch at wide receiver. Now, you have to cross your fingers. I don't know if both of them are going to be able to play 17 games every single year. If they are, great upgrade. If they're not, Bryce Lance is an excellent addition as a possibly low-level wide receiver 2. On this team, he would be a high-level wide receiver 3. I like the consistency he showed in college. I know it's a level up for him, but by the same token, I think he was smooth on the field. I've watched some tape on him. I think he knows how to get open. I think it's a good addition for a Kellen Moore coach team who relies on rhythm passing. So I like this, and I like Oscar Delp as well. I thought underutilized, kind of forgotten at Georgia at times. Of course, Georgia has a lot of weapons. I think there's upside to all 3 of these guys. I haven't said this in quite a long time, but I have New Orleans with a top 10 draft class. So congratulations. Unanswered questions. Will there be more defensive slippage? Now, that's quite possible. They did, everything I said about free agency, they didn't add offensive talent. Here we see a couple of defensive players, Christian Miller, that's fine. Lorenzo Styles, that's fine. But they may not be game 1 starters. They may be eased into the lineup. This may be a 1 or 2 year thing. So right now we may see a little more defensive slippage. That's something we should all check. And of course, we're going to check on quarterback play. Early goals, let's go right to the top. I know they were 2-10, but they finished 4-1. Wasn't against great competition. It was against their counterparts a lot in the NFC South. And again, they're not going to be facing great competition now, but who cares? The team and the roster and the draft improved them. They have a good coaching staff. The team should think that they could compete for the South. I'm going to go one step further, compete and maybe even win the South. Their win total is already higher than the other 2 teams we mentioned. At least at the start, their win total was 7.5 compared to the others. I went into after the draft thinking, whoa, let's see where New Orleans is on the win total. And then it's already been baked in. 22.5 is my power rating. I know that seems low compared to everything I've said about them, but 7.5 win total, remember, that's because they play the second easiest schedule. If they played a regular schedule, we would see New Orleans with a 6.5 win total and then a justifiable 22.5 power rating. And the other thing I want to mention, which is very important, power ratings are a snapshot of where I think this team is week 1. With all the growth that New Orleans might do and Tyler Shuck, what he might do, and the new wide receivers and so on, this is not reflective of where I think New Orleans might be week 10. It might be 24, 25, a power rating if they're on track to continue to improve as a staff and with their roster. But if you ask me about week 1, where they are with rookies, first games, and so on, this is where they are week 1, 22.5. It's only a snapshot of where they are week 1. The road schedule is is tricky. If there are injuries, we all need to adjust because the roster isn't quite deep enough. This 2026 draft was their first really deep draft, a top 10 draft. Previous drafts weren't as good, so injuries could affect them. But they're trending up. They're definitely trending up. And I'll watch them during the season. They should be right in the thick of things with that schedule. Throw them right into the hat for winning this division. Finally, the underachieving Tampa Bay Bucks. I don't know. There were about 5 times last year where I thought they were going to, okay, now the door is open for them to win the division. Now the schedule gets easier. Now Baker Mayfield can take the next step. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of this head coach. He takes over as defensive coordinator, so now he's going to wear 2 hats. I'm not sure he even had the 1 hat fit on right, but I think he's a better defensive coordinator than he is a head coach. I think the new offensive coordinator is decent, and that'll help Baker Mayfield. What'll help Baker Mayfield the most is getting healthy. He plays like a linebacker. He is a linebacker when he plays the quarterback position. So at the beginning of the year, you get the best version of Baker Mayfield because he's healthy. But he just throws his body at will, and I worry about his 17-game continuity. As usual with the Todd Bowles coach team, the pass defense is suspect. 2 out of every 3 passes are completed. What does that mean? You've heard me say it, come from ahead losses. They take the lead, they can't close them out because they don't play tight pass D. I mentioned, because I'm a special teams guy, their kick return defense was suspect. I put it on here because it's just a reminder to myself and others, let's see if it improves. Are they improving it? Are they paying more attention to that in the preseason? What do the September numbers look like? Or do they not get the new kickoff return rules in year number 3 here? And the coaching staff just doesn't care that much about special teams in that aspect, taking place kicker out of it. I put it there because if it's still a problem, it's a coaching problem. They'll miss wide receiver Evans because he catches everything, but I love the rest of the wide receiver unit. This is a deep unit. They have succession planned very well in 2025 and 2026. So they'll miss him at some points, but this is a better than average wide receiver unit. Linebacker David retired, not much added. It's a comfortable schedule. Between 11/22 and January 3rd, they're going to play some tougher non-divisional foes. But other than that, it's a comfortable schedule. Not as easy as New Orleans, but comfortable. The 2 guys I highlighted on this draft thing is Ted Hurst. I employ my wife as a combine assistant when we look at the gauntlet drill. And Ted Hurst was one of the top 3 guys in acing that drill. Historically, I love the gauntlet drill because there is a correlation between acing the gauntlet drill and maybe surprises in the NFL. Does that mean Ted Hurst is going to be your number 1 wide receiver? Not even close. But I think he could be, I think his ceiling is, let's say, middle of the pack wide receiver 2 or upper echelon wide receiver 3. And we know there's a lot of wide receiver 3 sets in the NFL. I like Ted Hurst, and he was properly drafted. I also like Keontae Scott. I think he could play some cornerback or some safety. That, I didn't mention the top 2 guys, but there's no real reason to mention them. We know what Bain can do. He's a sack presence. We know what Trotter could do. He's a very sure-handed tackler. They even got in the 5th round a couple of guys who will fill roster spots. Very useful rookie depth, a top 10 class. I honestly cannot remember the last time. Well, I can remember the last time. Tampa Bay has had the best draft in this division every year, except for the year after they won the Super Bowl, when they got a late start and they didn't really care about the draft, to be honest. They treated it as an afterthought. You could hear it in their voices and their comments, and they thought their starting 22 was coming back and they would be fine. Well, you can't stay the same in this NFL, and that was a bad draft. But everything else, because the other teams in the division tend not to draft well, Tampa tends to have the best draft. This year, Tampa and New Orleans have the best drafts. Unanswered questions. Baker Mayfield is still turnover prone because he tries to make something out of nothing. Turnovers count 3.5 points per turnover in the NFL. I'd like to see him somehow limit turnovers, and I'd like to see him stay healthy. Is it wise for Todd Bowles to be head coach and defensive coordinator? I think it's self-explanatory. I don't think it's wise. Obviously, their goal, like every team in this division, is not only to make the playoffs, although only one team will probably make it in this division, but to reclaim the title. And again, make games 16 and 17 win and in contests. There's no reason Tampa can't do that. They have a good enough roster. My question is coaching. Their win total is the highest in the division, but it's only 8.5 in 17 games. That means the highest win total in this division, they expect 8.5 wins and 8.5 losses. Not so great for the division. My power rating is the highest in the division, but it's not even league average. It's just 25. You say, okay, they're 25 and New Orleans is 22.5. But as the season rolls along, New Orleans might have upside with all their newcomers and the second-year staff. Where will Tampa's be if Baker Mayfield gets banged up? I'm concerned about him lasting that long. I've rated Bowles in my bottom 3 coaches list for the last 3 years. You have to have 2 seasons of NFL coaching to qualify. I still think the roster is the NFC South's best, but that's going to change. Even Carolina with 6 viable roster additions this year, New Orleans with a good draft. I think we're a year or 2 away where Tampa may not be as dominant in the division. And we saw they let down last year. If they're not going to be as dominant, then it's anybody's division. And that's pretty much what I think is going to happen here. Name the casino. I'll give you the name of the person involved, and that was Tony Miller. How about that? And Kellen Moore is a great coach. I really think if they give him, a long leash to let him build the roster and so on and so forth, to let him develop, I think Kellen Moore has a great future as an NFL head coach. And so I don't know if it'll be this year, but New Orleans could be a force. I'm not crazy about, this is a crazy stat. I think there are 2 crazy stats with New Orleans as I go a little over the time period. One is their GM has been in the position 24 years, something like that, which is unheard of in the NFL, not for long league. Number 2, their special teams coordinator has been in the league. What did I figure out? 20 years? I wrote it down when I was doing other things and when I was on other podcasts, but they reward continuity here. So he's got the same, GM. I'm not crazy about the GM, but maybe Kellen Moore is talking some sense into him and saying, hey, wait a second, let's not trade all our draft picks, because they tend not to trade down in the draft. They trade up in the draft. Anyway, enough about the NFC South. I hope my bullet points were valuable to you. You can find all my summer series previews on my YouTube channel. Here's the link, but you can also get the link from my X Twitter page. We've got a black tie affair planned for next Tuesday. We're going to get dressed up to do the final division. Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, and the Rams. I think they deserve a little bit more of a black tie affair. One more division to go, so hope you'll join me next Tuesday. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. See you next time.